24 to 9, as you're probably aware, the Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull yesterday criticised the New South Wales government, saying New South Wales's gas policies have failed Australia in helping to stop the looming power and gas crisis. However, the New South Wales Energy Minister Don Harwin says the federal government should trigger the Australian Domestic Gas Security Mechanism to force companies to limit exports. In a written statement, he says there has never been a moratorium on onshore gas development in New South Wales. Mr Harwin says the state has science-based regulation of the gas industry. And the New South Wales opposition says it's nonsense for the federal government to call on the state to start fracking for coal seam gas to avert a major gas shortage. The opposition's energy spokesman in New South Wales is Adam Searle. Mr Searle, good morning.
Good morning, Tony.
Should we ease restrictions on onshore gas exploration in New South Wales?
We have to draw a line between conventional and unconventional gas. In New South Wales, the experience with coal seam and other unconventional gas has been most unsatisfactory. There are unknown risks to the water table and to prime agricultural land. The fact is, Australia produces something like 3 times the amount of gas we need for domestic consumption. The problem is not supply. The problem is that the gas companies are selling 70% of our gas offshore, meaning that the gas that there is available is at an astronomical price. Now, since 2014, New South Wales Labor has said the solution is to adopt measures which every other gas-producing and exporting country has. That is a reservation policy to make sure that domestic consumers, households and businesses get first dibs on our gas at affordable prices. Now, we were attacked when we proposed that policy in 2014. The federal and state governments attacked us, the industry attacked us, but the federal government, in the face of this looming gas shortage, has developed a gas export restriction mechanism. Now is the time. They should trigger it to bring gas prices back under control.
The Australian Industry Group says the federal government needs to introduce gas export restrictions within weeks. You're saying that should be imposed now to reduce this 70% of all Australia's gas being exported.
Absolutely. There was a New South Wales Upper House inquiry that I sat on in 2014-15, which saw all the evidence of the looming shortage, and we knew the reasons, and we said, look, the only sensible solution is to do what America, Canada, Indonesia, Israel and every other gas producing and exporting country has, to make sure that there is a policy that makes sure that domestic consumers, households and businesses get access to gas at affordable prices before any gas is exported. Don't forget, the gas companies don't own the gas. Like any other resource, whether it's coal or anything else, the gas belongs to the Australian community. These companies get a licence to extract it and produce it, and yes, they're entitled to make a reasonable return on their investment, but they're not entitled to starve Australian households and businesses of the gas they need and to cause gas prices to spike astronomically. And don't forget, gas is also used in generating electricity, and the increase in the price of gas is driving the increase in the price of electricity as well. So on any analysis, whether you're talking about households being pushed to the limit of their financial resources, or businesses, particularly in West and southwestern Sydney, who use gas in their industrial manufacturing and processes, they need gas at affordable prices. Otherwise, their enterprises are placed at risk, and the jobs of hundreds of thousands of Australians is also placed at risk. This is beyond ideology. The federal government needs to pull the trigger now, and the New South Wales Premier and her Energy Minister needs to pick up the phone to Malcolm Turnbull, their fellow Liberal, and say, now is the time to act.
Mr Turnbull, nonetheless, says New South Wales's gas policies have failed Australia in helping to stop the looming crisis. Have we let the nation down, and should we be easing restrictions on coal seam gas exploration, for instance?
Absolutely not. Why should we risk our water and our prime agricultural lands producing dangerous coal seam gas when Australia produces 3 times the amount of gas we need? I mean, there is no gas shortage in Australia. Gas production in Australia has massively increased over the last 10 years. Although economists and theorists will tell you, the more supply, the lower the prices, that just doesn't work when the gas producers can sell every petajoule of gas they can to overseas consumers. The only way to bring gas prices under control in Australia and for New South Wales is to say to the gas companies, you can export so much, but no more. And there has to be enough available to households and businesses in New South Wales and across Australia at affordable prices.
What would that move though mean for our relations with the countries that we have the deals to provide them with this gas?
Well, it's not country to country, it's business to business. Private sector companies to private sector companies. And this happens all over the world. We're not suggesting, breaking contracts or the like. What we're saying is these companies that have a licence to access the gas we all own are breaking their social licence by not making sure there is gas at affordable prices for Australian households and businesses. And what we're saying is that those exports should be restricted from now, and so that there is more gas available at a reasonable price here in Australia. That won't affect our relations with other countries because every other gas-producing and exporting country in the world has these measures in place. We're the only one that doesn't.
Are there any other ways to avert a major gas shortage in New South Wales other than reducing the amount that's exported?
Not at all. Even if there was an approval given today for a new gas plant, it would take years before any gas was produced. The issue is not supply. Australia is awash in gas. We have massively increased the amount of gas production and supply in Australia. The problem is Australian households and businesses are not being given access at reasonable prices because of the greed and the incompetence of the gas companies. The market has failed. More supply is not bringing prices down, so government must intervene. Gas exports must be restricted, as New South Wales Labor has been calling for 3 years now.
What about, we've been hearing in ABC News this morning that the man behind a Queensland to New South Wales gas pipeline says it's a no-brainer that the state's gas crisis for next year will be worse than predicted. This is Western Energy's Garbus Simonian. He says if proposed CSG fields at Narrabri, for instance, brought online to feed gas-fired plants, it would solve the crisis. Should we go down that path?
Well, the Narrabri proposal is currently being assessed by the New South Wales Planning and Assessment Commission. That project has been underway for a long time, but of course, from everything I've seen and read, the expected supply of gas is not as great as people anticipate, but also the company, Santos, they don't want to necessarily have that gas made available for New South Wales or even for Australia, because they want to build a new gas pipeline down to the Sydney-Queensland pipeline and be able to export it to Queensland where it can be liquefied and shipped offshore. Whereas if they were to use the already approved pipeline plan from Narrabri to Newcastle, that would guarantee it would be used in New South Wales. So even if the Santos project at Narrabri goes ahead, its proponent, Santos, I don't think has any intention of making sure the supply is only for New South Wales. So that is not the solution.
So there's no doubt in your mind that the New South Wales State Government should handball this straight back to the Prime Minister?
It's not a question of handballing. This is a national problem requiring a national solution. The federal government has given itself the mechanism through the gas export restriction mechanism, and the market has obviously failed. When markets fail, governments must act in the public interest. Now, they gave themselves this over a year ago. The Prime Minister said he would act in July. Earlier this year, he put it off until January next year. How much more evidence does he need? The fact is the need is now, it's pressing on businesses and households. Gladys Berejikian, the Premier of New South Wales, should pick up the phone to her Liberal mate in Canberra and say the time to act is now.
All right, we'll leave it there for now. Thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Adam Searle, Shadow Minister for Industry, Resources and Energy in New South Wales on this looming gas and energy crisis.